Miguel was only 14 years old, and like any kid starting at a new school, he wanted to go unnoticed during the first weeks. But that's not how it happened. Black, with the curly hair he inherited from his father, he quickly became the target of jokes disguised as teasing. It only took someone finding out that his father was the janitor at Monte Azul's school for a nickname to stick like gum on a shoe, Janitor's son. Playable, but loaded with prejudice. These things almost never start in public. Come the snickers in the hallway, the sideways glances in line. It's the innocent questions about whether he also cleaned floors at home. Miguel, who wasn't one to stay silent, held back because he remembered his father's words. Breathe in for counts, always. A simple breathing technique that in moments like this felt like an invisible shield. Loro, his father, arrived. At the school, when the city was still asleep, the hallway smelled of disinfectant and strong coffee, and his calm demeanor went almost unnoticed to those who only saw him pushing the cleaning cart. But there was something in that gaze, steady and watchful, that seemed to read each person he passed. Loro knew the place better than most. Racism and classism seeped into the cracks of everyday life. In Miguel's case, they came disguised as jokes about his hair or teachers who mispronounced his name over and over, even with his badge hanging around his neck. Small gestures that together tried to define who he was, but accepting. That place was never part of his upbringing. The lowest blow came when a video started circulating in the class group chat. A clipped scene where he seemed cornered without showing what had really happened. The images traveled fast, accompanied by cruel captions. Miguel almost fought back right then, but took a deep breath. The hardest part was not letting his eyes betray the pain he felt. He remembered hearing his father say once, while mopping the kitchen floor, "Some people just want you to react so they can confirm the story they've made up about you." And he knew it was true. Responding on impulse could reinforce exactly what they expected. Miguel chose to save his energy for a more decisive moment. One morning when he opened his locker, he found a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was rushed. "You don't belong here. Leave before we make you." It was no longer just provocation. It was a threat. Threats, even in silence, could weigh more than any shove. Miguel didn't tell his father right then, maybe because he feared that intense calm that always came before something important happened. There was a kind of serenity in Loro that was never random, as if he knew things Miguel didn't yet understand. It was as if there was a code behind every gesture. What Miguel didn't know was that, in the early hours of the morning, his father lived a life that none of those school hallways knew about, and when that part came to light, that nickname that bothered him so much would lose all the weight it seemed to carry now. The teasing against Miguel gained strength, as if it had become a trend. It shifted from occasional jokes to a campaign disguised as just messing around. Edited images of Loro in his janitor's uniform circulated, paired with ironic phrases, and comments dripping with veiled racism. The hallways, once just paths between classes, became observation corridors where every move he made seemed to be scrutinized. It was a cruel game he had never asked to play. Loro sensed the weight it was placing on his son. In the rare moments they spoke about it, he mentioned something he called the code. According to him, strength wasn't meant to prove anything to anyone but to protect. Between work tasks, he would teach. Open hands, lowered shoulders, chin aligned. Small details that, through body language, transmitted calm and security without humiliating the other person. Miguel practiced these gestures, like someone memorizing choreography. But what he really wanted was to know where this code came from. He asked, pressed, and always got the same answer, a half smile and a change of subject. It was as if his father carried a secret manual written on pages Miguel wasn't allowed to read yet. But without realizing it, he was already learning. The language the days went on, and the pressure grew. During physical education class, he heard remarks about matching uniforms with his father. In the cafeteria, quiet comments about inherited professions. The laughter was always quick, sharp, and vanished the moment an adult passed by. It was a well-rehearsed play, with the sole aim of making him feel smaller. Miguel remembered the code and kept his posture. At home, Loro never demanded details. He observed, offered short pieces of advice, and returned to his tasks. There was a way he taught without needing long explanations. A steady look at the right moment seemed to say more than any speech. Miguel didn't know it, but this way of carrying himself was just as much a part of the code as any explicit rule. One night, Miguel woke up to the sound of an engine outside, pulled the curtain back and saw a black car parked in front of the house. Leroux, already dressed and wearing clothes different from his janitor's uniform, got into the vehicle without saying a word. The car pulled away slowly, disappearing at the corner. Miguel stood still, trying to make sense of it. This was not part of the routine. The silence of the night made the questions louder. Where was his father going at that hour? Why had he never seen those clothes before? And who were the people in the car? They were questions he wouldn't have the courage to ask the next morning. For now, the code remained a mystery. The next day, nothing in Laura's behavior gave away the strange departure. He kept cleaning the hallways with the same calm greeting. Teachers and students as if nothing had happened. Miguel realized there was something much bigger happening behind this seemingly simple routine. It was as if his father was living two stories at the same time. He just didn't know that soon. He would get a glimpse behind that second story. It would completely change the way he saw not only his father, but himself. The teasing against Miguel gained strength, as if it had become a trend. It shifted from occasional jokes to a campaign disguised as just messing around. Edited images of Lauro in his janitor's uniform circulated, paired with ironic phrases, and comments dripping with veiled racism. The hallways, once just paths between classes, became observation corridors where every move he made seemed to be scrutinized. It was a cruel game he had never asked to play. Lauro sensed the weight it was placing on his son. In the rare moments they spoke about it, he mentioned something he called the code. According to him, strength wasn't meant to prove anything to anyone but to protect. Between work tasks, he would teach. Open hands, lowered shoulders, chin aligned. Small details that, through body language, transmitted calm and security without humiliating the other person. Miguel practiced these gestures, like someone memorizing choreography. But what he really wanted was to know where this code came from. He asked, pressed, and always got the same answer. A half smile and a change of subject. It was as if his father carried a secret manual written on pages Miguel wasn't allowed to read yet. But without realizing it, he was already learning. The language the days went on, and the pressure grew. During physical education class, he heard remarks about matching uniforms with his father. In the cafeteria, quiet comments about inherited professions. The laughter was always quick, sharp, and vanished the moment an adult passed by. It was a well-rehearsed play, with the sole aim of making him feel smaller. Miguel remembered the code and kept his posture. At home, Lauro never demanded details. He observed, offered short pieces of advice, and returned to his tasks. There was a way he taught without needing long explanations. A steady look at the right moment seemed to say more than any speech. Miguel didn't know it, but this way of carrying himself was just as much a part of the code as any explicit rule. One night, Miguel woke up to the sound of an engine outside, pulled the curtain back and saw a black car parked in front of the house. Leroux, already dressed and wearing clothes different from his janitor's uniform, got into the vehicle without saying a word. The car pulled away slowly, disappearing at the corner. Miguel stood still, trying to make sense of it. This was not part of the routine. The silence of the night made the questions louder. Where was his father going at that hour? Why had he never seen those clothes before? And who were the people in the car? They were questions he wouldn't have the courage to ask the next morning. For now, the code remained a mystery. The next day, nothing in Laura's behavior gave away the strange departure. He kept cleaning the hallways with the same calm greeting. Teachers and students as if nothing had happened. Miguel realized there was something much bigger happening behind this seemingly simple routine. It was as if his father was living two stories at the same time. He just didn't know that soon. He would get a glimpse behind that second story. It would completely change the way he saw not only his father, but himself. At home, Lauro moved with the same precision he used in the training field, but with a gentler touch, cooked beans while an old vinyl played in the corner. And Miguel watched that ritual, which seemed more about patience than food. Between stirring the pot and adjusting the flame, spoke about the women in the family. Grandmother, mother, aunts, who cleaned to open doors. Stories that carried dignity and quiet strength. The conversations were simple but loaded with meaning. Lauro spoke about listening more than speaking, noticing the entry and exit routes of any place, and never sitting with your back to the door. Lessons were delivered without haste, as if they were simply chatting. Miguel, without realizing it, absorbed every detail. In the late afternoons, some training sessions happened without being named as such. A walk through the neighborhood became a lesson in spotting cover points. A trip to the bakery turned into an exercise in observing the environment. For Miguel, it was almost a game, but his father knew he was building something much bigger. It was during one of these routines that Bia entered the picture. A classmate of Miguel's, she witnessed a public humiliation against him and, unlike the others, didn't laugh or look away. Instead, she approached and started a conversation. Miguel found it strange at first, but soon realized there was a rare kind of loyalty there. Bia listened, but she also observed. She noticed how Miguel stayed calm, even when provoked and recognized. The invisible influence of his father. She didn't ask directly, but made it clear she wanted to understand. Between them, a quiet alliance began to form. At home, Lauro noticed the change. He saw when Miguel began walking with more awareness, when his movements became more controlled. Small marks of discipline that appeared without him having to demand them. The code was slowly taking shape in his son's posture, but the school environment remained hostile. The sideways glances, the veiled jokes, and the constant pressure from the bullies, led by Caio, gave no respite. Then came the party, an invitation that seemed harmless but had a hidden purpose. Miguel sensed something was wrong, and the feeling stuck with him like a silent alarm. Lauro, unaware of the invitation, carried on with his tasks. Even so, the instinct he had developed over the years told him when something was shifting out of place. The pieces were still on the board, but tension was starting to build. What Miguel didn't yet know was that this party would be the first major test of everything he had been learning, and the code would be more necessary than ever. The invitation to the party seemed harmless on paper, but it carried a hidden intent. On the set day, Miguel arrived and realized there was no music, no celebratory atmosphere. Instead, he was surrounded by a group of students who began pushing him toward the center of an improvised space. Laughter, phones pointed at him, and the live stream began. The paint came first. Blue splashes stained his uniform, the strong smell clinging to the air. Then came calculated shoves meant to knock him off balance. Miguel felt his body react, but remembered the code. Protect your space, don't attack. His arms positioned to block, his body turned to avoid direct contact. He was at the center of a scene with more spectators than participants. One of the aggressors tried a heavier, strike a punch that could have broken his nose. Miguel blocked the movement with a quick, firm gesture, holding the wrist in the air for a moment before letting go. There was no anger in his eyes, only control, that infuriated those who had been expecting an explosive reaction. The provocations shifted tone. Someone outside the circle shouted that his father had a criminal record. The rumor spread like wildfire, reaching the wrong ears within hours. When the principal was informed, she chose to suspend until further investigation, rather. Then here Lauro sighed. The hallway he cleaned every day felt emptier without him there. Miguel returned home with his clothes stained and silence lodged in his throat. Lauro received him as always, without immediate questions, but his eyes already said he understood. Words took time to come, and when they did, they were cut off by the sound of notifications on Miguel's phone. New messages with clips from the live stream the next day. Anonymous posters appeared taped to the school bulletin boards. Cleaning isn't a father's job, it's a disgrace. The cheap paper hid the cruelty in every letter. Miguel, standing in front of one, tore it down with his hands, not caring who was watching. His quickened breathing betrayed that the code was being tested. Bia approached in silence, pulled down another poster from a wall, and tucked it into her pocket. There was no speech, just the act. Between them, the understanding was immediate. This had gone too far. The weight now wasn't just on Miguel, but on everyone carrying invisible histories through those hallways. At home, Lauro folded his work uniform and put it away without a word. There was something in his posture that suggested he wasn't just waiting for the right moment to act, he was planning. Miguel didn't know it yet. But that calm was the prelude to a move that would change everything. The trap that had been set to humiliate was about to turn into a stage for a revelation no one expected. Miguel spent the next few days quieter than usual. Silence felt like a wall between him and the rest of the world. When Lauro tried to start a conversation, his son answered with only a few words. Until one night, he simply said, "The dignity of work is non-negotiable." The phrase was short but heavy with certainty. It was one of Lauro's maxims. Repeated so many times at home it had become part of the air. For him, no matter what people said about the profession, every task done with honesty had value. Miguel, though still weighed down, seemed to find some support in those words. It wasn't full comfort, but it was a reminder of where his strength came from. Meanwhile, Bia wasn't standing still. She began piecing things together, quietly talking to anyone who might know more about the criminal record rumor. The trail led to an unexpected source, Caio's own father. She discovered he was the one who had spread the story, planting the lie as if it were fact. The revelation put Bia in front of a choice: keep what she knew to herself or act. She chose the second. She told Miguel plainly, giving him the details of what she'd found. He listened in silence, but his eyes revealed a storm of feelings. There was no victory in knowing the truth, only the confirmation that the game was dirtier than he had imagined. Caio, for his part, was beginning to realize things had gone too far. The tough posture he kept in front of his friends was no longer holding up as firmly. But giving in would mean facing his own responsibility, and that was harder than keeping up appearances. The atmosphere at school was heavy. The looks aimed at Miguel were split between curiosity, disdain, and a few, respect. The rumor still circulated, but now it was mixed with whispers that something big was about to happen. Miguel didn't react, he just observed, as if waiting for the next move. Lauro kept to his routine, but stayed alert. He knew some conflicts needed to ripen before they could be resolved. He avoided direct confrontations, preferring to act. When the impact would be greater, it was a game of patience and he knew how to play it. Then, an official announcement was made. There would be an evacuation drill at the school, with participation from the civil defense. The notice seemed harmless, but for those who knew Lauro, it was a signal. Yet the coincidence of dates and places was rarely a coincidence at all. When Miguel read the announcement on the bulletin board, he didn't yet know that this event would tie together every thread of the story, and that the half-truths would soon be brought fully into the light. The day of the drill began like any other. Students moved through the hallways, some talking about the scheduled exercise. Miguel was alert, but had no idea something unexpected was about to happen. In the science lab wing, a silent short circuit was beginning to produce thick smoke. When the alarm finally went off, it sounded weak, leaving part of the building without warning. Lauro, officially suspended from work, was waiting outside to pick up his son after classes. His trained eyes sensed something was wrong even before the smell of burning spread. He noticed closed doors, people running aimlessly, and the typical confusion of poorly managed panic. His breathing deepened, as if calibrating the exact moment. To act without drawing attention, he entered through the service access only janitors used. Familiarity with that route allowed him to move quickly through empty corridors. The heat was rising, and smoke spread through the rooms, casting shadows and distorting visibility. Every step was precise, without wasted energy. In the main hallway, he found a group of students struggling to open a jammed door. He pulled a damp cloth from his cleaning kit and handed it to them so they could breathe more easily. With masking tape, he sealed the cracks of a room, turning it into a temporary shelter until it was safe to leave. Improvised yet methodical, he advanced toward the lab where the fire was still small but threatening to grow. He grabbed a fire extinguisher and, instead of just putting out the flames, created a protective curtain to clear a path. He used the cleaning cart as an improvised stretcher to transport a student who had twisted her ankle in the rush. The scene was chaotic, but his movements were clear and coordinated. In the inner courtyard, a teacher was trying to calm a child in distress. Lauro knelt, kept eye contact, and used a firm but low voice to guide the girl's breathing until she was stable. There was no haste in his actions, only precision. His presence seemed to create a safe space even amid danger. Through the smoke, a voice rang out in the hallway. Instructor Rocha was one of the civil defense agents participating in the drill. The name spoken loudly cut through the air like a signal. Some stopped in surprise. The janitor had just been given a title that shifted the weight of the entire story. BIA. Among the evacuated students was holding her phone, recording part of the action. Her gaze shifted between what she was seeing and the screen, as if she wanted proof that it was real. The camera captured Loro's posture, his natural authority, and the way each order he gave was followed without hesitation. The drill, meant to be just an exercise, had turned into a real evacuation operation. And at its center was someone who, until just days ago, had been invisible to most. The word instructor echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. The noise around seemed to dissolve, and for a moment all that could be heard was the quickened breathing of those present. Eyes turned toward Loro, some filled with shock, others trying to reconcile this new information with the image they had of him. The janitor was in command. Loro didn't stop to explain. He kept moving, guiding groups toward the safest exit. Along the way, he found a jammed door keeping Kaio trapped in a smoke-filled room. With swift movements, he instructed the boy to control his breathing and protect his head. In seconds, he opened an alternative route and let him out. In the courtyard, evacuated students gathered at improvised triage points. Teachers and staff helped as best they could, but it was Loro's voice that organized the flow. He gave direct orders, pointed out routes, and at the same time calmed those in panic. His authority didn't come from shouting, but from the clarity of each action. As the smoke began to clear, journalists and some parents arrived. Cameras and phones sought to capture the scene. A civil defense officer in front of everyone confirmed. Loro Roca, Special Forces instructor, had led the evacuation. A murmur spread, shifting the expressions all around. Miguel, standing next to Bia, watched every reaction. The same people who once whispered or mocked now looked at him differently. His father's posture, firm but without arrogance, showed there was no need to prove anything. It was as if in that moment, every fragment of the story had rearranged itself. Kaio, still trembling, sat on a bench while drinking water. Loro knelt down, still wearing rubber gloves, and tied the boy's shoelaces. He said nothing about the recent past. He only left the words, "Strength exists to bring you back home." CO lowered his eyes, unable to respond. The press recorded the moment, but the gesture seemed intended for a much smaller audience, perhaps just for Kaio himself. Miguel realized that his father's code went far beyond defense techniques. It was about choice, about the kind of strength one decides to use. The courtyard, once filled with chaos, began to reorganize. The sun now lit the entire court, and the smoke faded into the air. Loro stayed until the last student was released. There was no rush to leave. The scene had become a milestone for everyone who witnessed it. But for some, that revelation didn't end the story. It only opened a new phase, where everyone's role would begin to be reevaluated. The open meeting was scheduled for the next day in the school courtyard. Parents, students, and staff gathered in improvised chairs, forming a wide circle. The air still carried traces of the recent tension, but there was also a clear sense of curiosity. In the center, the principal stood to speak. With a steady voice, she admitted she had made a mistake in suspending Loro without hearing his side. She apologized for the premature judgment and said the situation had shown how much everyone still needed to learn about respect and prejudice. Her words were met with a mix of silence and nods. Then Loro stood up. He wore his janitor's uniform, clean and neatly pressed, as a symbol. He spoke about dignity, explaining that he had chosen that work to be near his son during the right shifts, and also out of pride for his grandmother, who had cleaned schools without ever being recognized. Being black here doesn't mean hiding. Your resume, it means carrying history. The silence in the courtyard turned into full attention. Miguel, sitting nearby, kept his posture straight, absorbing every word. The speech wasn't just about defending a name, but about affirming a principle. The staff scattered around the courtyard exchanged glances of pride and emotion. When it was his turn to speak, Miguel didn't attack, said he wanted a public repair, not only for him and his father, but for all the invisible workers. He asked the school to formally recognize their value and to create measures to ensure that situations like this would not be repeated. CAI. Called to the center, took a deep breath before admitting that the rumor about Laro had begun with his father. His voice wavered, but the words came out. The apology was made in front of everyone, followed by a commitment to make amends, recording a video, acknowledging the mistake and participating in community work with the cleaning staff. Bia, sitting beside Miguel, lightly squeezed his arm, as if to say without words that this was only the start of a change. The exchange of glances between them carried the certainty that small victories could open big paths. The meeting ended with a different feeling than it had begun. It wasn't euphoria, but the start of a reorganization. Parents spoke among themselves. Some staff were greeted by name for the first time. Laro's presence, standing at the center, remained like an anchor. And from that moment on, school would have to deal with a new reality, one in which each person's story could no longer be ignored. Laro's return to work was anything but quiet. As he arrived at the gate, he was met with handshakes, embraces, and looks that had never been directed his way before. In his clean uniform, the ID badge hung firmly on his chest, like an emblem. He walked the halls no longer as someone invisible, but as a reference point. That same day, the birth of the School Guardians program was announced. The proposal included training in breathing techniques, empathy, evacuation, first aid, anti-racism, and citizenship. The idea was simple: to transform the school into a place prepared not only for physical emergencies, but also for human crises. The presentation ceremony was held in the courtyard. Staff members who once went unnoticed were called by name and applauded one by one. The sound of the clapping echoed differently, as if each beat was a silent apology. Laura watched quietly, but with a restrained gleam in his eyes. Miguel, now with a confident posture, took on a new role. He led a conflict mediation group among students, applying in daily life what he had learned from his father: listening, observing, choosing the right moment to speak. Gradually, he realized that leadership didn't come from physical strength, but from clarity and presence. Bia, always nearby, became an active part of the initiatives. She proposed cultural activities and discussion circles, encouraging other students to get involved. Her energy helped keep the spirit of collaboration alive, turning the proposal into more than just a project. It became a movement. Laro's Code, once confined to home conversations, took form on the school's main mural. Painted by students' hands, it bore the phrase, "Strength that protects deserves respect." The large, vivid letters contrasted with the pale wall, visible from anywhere in the courtyard. The changes began to extend beyond the school walls. Parents commented on how their children were becoming more aware of what they said and did. Small gestures like greeting the doorman by name or thanking the cleaning staff became more common. The impact was spreading. Loro continued his routine, now without carrying the weight of being ignored. Each step down the corridors was met with greetings, nods, and smiles. He returned them all, but kept his calm demeanor like someone who knows that true respect is measured over time. Miguel, walking beside his father, felt the difference. They no longer moved through those corridors like shadows. Now they were presence, reference, and for many, inspiration. Yet in Loro's eyes, there was always room for the next challenge.